in the right place, but for the wrong reason. In the right place, but for the wrong reason. In this writing, Dr. Luke has recorded a parable that Jesus has shared. Now, any of you that have been around there for more than a year have recognized what a parable is. A parable is a story that's designed to simplify a truth that may have been difficult to understand previously. Parabole literally means to run alongside. So a parable is designed to run alongside of the truth, but to help you to understand it better. In the Jewish tradition, there was this thing in the cities that whenever a person had been fasting, they were not supposed to allow other people to know that they were fasting. As a matter of fact, the law suggests that when you fast, you wash your face, you comb your hair, you clean up, as not to draw attention to your physical being to tell what's going on in your life. However, you know as well as I do, people have a tendency to want everybody to know their situation. And so, historically, there were individuals who would put whitewash paint on their faces when they would fast. Their appearance would be disheveled. And then they would go into the certain parts of the cities. It is believed to be Tuesdays and Thursdays, because those were the days when the markets were brought into the city. And so those that were fasting, you do know that the text says, the parable Jesus gave said that the one individual fasts twice a week. He was trying to suggest, just for a moment, that he was going beyond the norm in order to show that he was so pietistic that he would just literally do more than what was required. Jesus is using this story because the text wants us to know that they were both in the same place. There's no ambiguity about one being here and one being there. The text says they were both in the place, same place, and they had gathered. They were in the temple. Now you got to acknowledge that both of them had shown up in the place, and they had shown up there for prayer. The text wants us to know that the one is without a doubt a Pharisee, which would push us to ask the question, what is there different about a Pharisee? A Pharisee is an individual who has been convicted and converted by his religious convictions to suggest that he is accepting of the Levitical law and wants to do everything that it requires. The Pharisees wore certain types of robes with tassels at the end of them. They wanted to make sure that everyone knew who was a Pharisee. A Pharisee was an individual who had recited and who had digested the Torah, the Pentateuch, the Hallel, knew the Psalms, could quote them, 150 of them. I mean, they were so scholarly and knew everything that they needed to know to be a good Pharisee. You know, like some of us who lay claims to knowing the Bible and can have the capabilities of quoting it and can walk around town and church so pietistic and look holy and have our Bibles, or at least claim we know parts of it. And somehow this Pharisee is standing here in the temple and is involved in prayer. And I pull over for just a moment because there is an audience of individuals who are watching carefully everything that the Pharisee is doing, and they are impressed because the Pharisee seems to know a little bit more than they do, and he seems to be a little bit holier than they are, and seems to be able to do more things theologically than they are capable of doing, and they are quite impressed because he is standing out shoulders above the rest as he stands there in the temple and prays and acknowledges that there is something about him that stands shoulders above everybody else. Have you ever gone to church and you have been next to somebody or behind somebody or in front of somebody that they've made it quite obvious that they know more about Scripture than you do? Wow. Have you ever been around them inside of the church that every time you see them, they are so holy, can quote so much Scripture, but there's no evidence in it when they walk? This holy roller, this self-righteous individual who has shown up in the temple appears to be righteous, but there is still some segment of spirituality that appears to be missing in his life. Watch what he said. My wife always gets on me because I'll talk to her and I'll say, baby, see what I said? She said, Jimmy, how in the world am I going to see what you say? Look at the text. See what he said. Because the brother is there and he's got an issue. He's unaware that he's got an issue. Well, he has shown up in the temple. He's in the right place, a place of prayer, a place of worship. He is praying, but his prayer is confined to him. Am I talking to anybody this morning? He is praying, but his prayer seems to be only going room high because he's talking to himself and his audience. Whenever prayer goes out, it should be designed so that somehow prayer goes to God, not just to your audience. And I know that sometimes when we are praying, we get to praying and all of a sudden, but we forget that we are talking to an angelic being, and all of a sudden we start to speaking and trying to impress people who are around us. We try to make sure that they are impressed with our dialogue, and all of a sudden they're about ready to shout because we're praying. This brother is praying. And he said, you know what, God, I'm so glad that you didn't make me like all them other folk. Read your text. He said, I'm glad I'm not like those evildoers, those robbers, those adulterers. I'm so glad that's not one of my infractions. Just for a moment, when you dissect his prayer, you discover they may not be the issues he's dealing with but he's got some other stuff that seems to be challenging him. His sin may not be what somebody else's sin is, but he's got a sin. He may not be an evildoer. He may not be a robber, a liar. He may not even be somebody who's an adulterer. But there are some issues in his life that are obvious here in this text. And then he becomes so bold and audacious that he should look around and then point fingers. Not only am I glad that I'm not like everybody else who has shown up here in the temple, but I'm glad I'm not like that joker over there, that tax collector. And don't forget, according to the story that Jesus is telling, this is a parable for everybody else to hear and to understand. This may not be an actual moment, but Jesus is taking this as an opportunity to dialogue and to teach. This morning, on this 27th day of August, your pastor is taking this as an opportunity not just to preach, but to teach you so that somehow you recognize when you show up in this place of prayer and worship, you don't get caught up in looking around at somebody else, recognizing their faults and fallacies, thinking that you don't have any, because every one of us are showing up in the temple with a problem. So the text informs us that while the Pharisee has a problem and looks over at the tax collector, Jesus now pulls on the tax collector. Wait just a moment. Because everybody knows that according to Jewish law, if you're going to hate anybody, you ought to hate the tax collector. Because after all, his position is that he is someone who gleans your possessions, your revenue, and then takes it back to the Roman government. And on top of that, in order to fill his own coffers, he is charging you more than's necessary so that he can fill his own pockets off of what you had. So every good Jew thought to themselves, there is nobody in society that's more hated than the tax collector.
I know that's right.
And Jesus has put up before humanity the Pharisee who was more holy and righteous according to the Levitical law and according to the Jewish nation, pitted up against the tax collector who was hated by everyone, who seems to be taking everything they've got. And Jesus says, let me inform you of this one thing. This tax collector that you have assessed and you do not like will be perceived as more righteous than the Pharisees that you've been lifting up head and shoulders above all of the rest. I'm not finished just yet. It's all in the text. And so while we are examining the text and recognizing that but for the grace of God goes on. So as you show up in the temple, whatever you do, don't look to your left or your right. Try to assess whether or not that person is it right in the sight of God, or whether you are better off than they are. Recognizing that there might be somebody in here that you're looking down on, and God is looking up to. Now, like most of us, we're looking at the text and we're thinking to ourselves, you know, there is no possible way this joker that's a tax collector that we hate, we dislike him, he comes from the other side of the track, and he's not a pedigree like we are. He's somebody that's just taking the money from our people and giving it to somebody else. What is it that Jesus wants us to know in this text? How is that applicable to where we live today when it was written thousands of years ago? What does it have to say to me now? All right, I'm glad you asked. We have shown up in a place that's been designated to worship God. We come in with all preconceived ideas of how we think things ought to go. We got infractions in our own personal lives that people know about and some don't know about. We've messed up, marred from the head to the floor. If the truth were known, if you knew everything you needed to know about somebody that's sitting near you, it would probably frighten you and you would exit momentarily. But the truth of the matter is you know some stuff about you that frightens you about you. I don't have to look around at anybody else's life. All I gotta do is look inwardly. I got some stuff in there that scares me to death. Some of it was years ago. And then some of it is fresh with me still hanging on it. Come on, talk to me this morning. You arrived in the temple. You know you brought some stuff with you. You came in here to pray, but somebody got in your way. Yeah. This morning, I came by to let you know that you came to the temple with a plan. When you got in here, you wanted to pray, you wanted to solicit God to bless your life. But before you could get to the prayer ground, something got between you and God. I don't know what kind of looks he gave you. I don't know how he shook your hand. I don't know if they faced you or turned your back to you. But you just know that when you got in here, everything was just right early on. But between early on and exit, something caught you and gripped you up. Oh, talk to me. It ain't been all that good all week long. You've had some stuff that just messed you up. But then God said this morning, Smith, when you see him, reminded that they might be in the right place, but they might have shown up with the wrong reason. Instead of arriving in the temple to worship, some of you are assessing somebody else. Some of you brought some stuff in here that got in your way. But this morning, I dare you to let it go. I dare you to let God take over. I dare you this morning to trust God to bless your life. And watch in the prayer room what God will do. Watch him heal some folks. Watch him mend the broken heart. Watch him give peace to a troubled mind. That's what God will do. So if she walks away from you, that's all right. Trust God. If that knucklehead Negro won't act right, that's all right. Trust God. If your bank account is looking fickle, trust God. Still soft. Still in control. Just make sure you show up with the right intention. And that's to trust God to do what only God can do. Come on, stand with me this morning. Bless you. Bless you. In the right place. But for the wrong reason. When you leave the house on Sunday morning and make your way to the place of worship, it's called a place of worship for a reason. And you can worship God when you know who God is. But you can't fake it. He's too big. He's too knowledgeable. You can't pretend. He knows. You might be able to fool the people.